Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is 8 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, Wednesday morning, December 29th. I'm happy to be here. Missed my show this morning, slept in, turned off my alarm clock. Sorry about that. So I thought, well, I'll reschedule. And I rescheduled, and I only rescheduled for 15 minutes. So we're on for 15 minutes live, but I'm going to continue talking. So if anybody wants to catch the show, the rest of the show after, I'll be on there for about a half an hour as normal. So sorry about that, but we'll be on live for 15 minutes. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and I'll get right into the show. You know, I'm not a counselor or therapist, and I don't hold any certificates in those areas. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own Blog Talk shows, just to be one more voice out here speaking out against abuse and standing up for child rights, as well as, you know, just another survivor who wants to be another voice for everybody. So there's a lot of voices out there speaking out, and there's a lot of survivors out there who are speaking publicly and out there helping people. And I mean, you know, I'd have to do a whole week's worth of shows just to cover who they are. But you can find them. And, you know, if you look around, if you need any information, get a hold of me. They are out there. And I just wanted to be one more voice to add to theirs, really. And so that's why I'm doing these Blog Talk shows. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. You have to listen at your own discretion. Everything I talk about is very sensitive. And so if you find the material of anything, you know, to do with abuse sensitive, or, you know, that might bother you, you have to turn the show off. It is your discretion. If you're a young person under the age of 18, you have to have permission to listen to my shows. The reason I say that is because I believe in protecting children at all times, and I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for abused children, and I volunteer with them, and, you know, we're fighting to save children's lives. That's what we're doing. We're fighting to stand up for children's rights, to protect children, to fight for change so that we can stop child abuse, right? And so if you're a young person under the age of 18, have somebody who's older, an adult, help you make the decision whether you should be listening to my shows, okay? Thanks, everybody. So we'll get right into this article where we left off yesterday. We were looking at this article a couple of days now, and this is from www.mentalhealth.net, called The Effects of Abuse, and it's written by Catherine Patricelli. Catherine Patricelli has written quite a few articles on abuse and whatnot. MA. She must have a degree or something, or in psychology or counseling or therapy or something. So she wrote quite a few articles on related to abuse and domestic violence, child abuse, and whatnot. So this article comes from Catherine Patricelli, Effects of Abuse, from www.mentalhealth.net. We were looking at it, and she was saying that abuse doesn't necessarily cause psychological or medical illness. That's where we were talking about yesterday, but it can. It can sort of bring about issues like PTSD, and people call them anxiety issues and things like this. Can also cause issues with personality disorders. That's what she was saying here, such as dissociative disorder, dissociative identity disorder, DID, right? It can also, cause sexual disorders and different things like this, low self-esteem and whatnot. So we were sort of talking about that, and she says here, it's important to note that abuse alone is not sufficient to create psychological disorders. Abuse can be a very strong factor contributing to their development. However, developing a psychological disorder such as depression does not mean that you were necessarily abused. And being abused does not mean you will develop depression. And abuse is a sufficient cause for depression. However, there are many other reasons why someone might become depressed. And I've seen this on quite a few websites, and actually just about everyone that deals with survivors, and like the ASCA, the Adult Survivors of Child Abuse. They have a great workbook on their website, the ASCA.org, and it's called Survivor to Thriver. And we went through that. That's way back, like last year sometime. I mean, probably 7 months ago or something. I don't know. It's been a while since we went through that stuff, but that is an awesome workbook for survivors of child abuse, and I went through the whole thing piece by piece, and on there they talked a lot about that. They were saying just because you have some of these symptoms, or you might have low self-esteem, you might have depression, doesn't mean you were abused as a child, and just because you were abused as a child does not mean that you may experience PTSD or low self-esteem. It's just that some people do, and that's why they talk about this stuff, because so many of us that have been abused, experience some of these things, and not all of them, just maybe some of them or one of them, So, that's why I like to take a look at this stuff, just to see, because, to sort of recognize my own behaviors and what happened, because looking back at the abuse that I suffered, I kind of look back at how I felt as a child and how I felt growing up as a teenager and how I felt as a young adult, and I can see where the abuse definitely affected my life all the way through and still is today, you know what I mean? But at least I have a lot more control of my behaviors now, and that's because I have decided to walk through it instead of just push it to the back burner, you know what I mean? So I'm working through a lot of this stuff, and that's what I've been doing, right? So by taking a look at it, it's good because I can see where my behaviors were, kind of sort of came about because of the abuse that I suffered, right? So that's why I'm working on this stuff, because I'm trying to heal from a whole lot of damage, right? So she says here, post-trauma responding, though it is an oversimplified and perhaps even overreaching suggestion to make, it may be easiest to think of the cluster of problems that are typically observed in the wake of abuse as all various forms of a sort of post-trauma condition, where the trauma experienced is abuse. And post-trauma conditions such as PTSD occur in the aftermath of a significant trauma, where trauma is defined as exposure to some event that involves the threat or reality of death, even one's own or another's. And not all abuse situations get this scary, but many are disturbing enough in one fashion or another to make a lasting impact on a person's mind. So she says here, when post-trauma illnesses occur, they are characterized by the presence of three classes of symptoms. First, the post-trauma victims typically experience vivid, unwanted, and highly intrusive memories of their traumatic events. Intrusive recollections may occur during waking hours or during sleep, often in the form of vivid and repetitive nightmares reenacting the trauma. Second, post-trauma victims make efforts to avoid exposing themselves to anything that might remind them of their trauma. And third, post-trauma victims become very anxious and jumpy after their trauma. As I should be clear from thoughtful contemplation of these symptoms, PTSD can be a very debilitating condition, she says. So, that's just it, I don't know if I have PTSD or not. I haven't never been diagnosed. I've never seen a psychotherapist or counselor or anything like that. Hello, Gypsy Witch. I got my good friend from Australia here. Hello. Glad to have you here. Hope you had a great night. And this is the thing. I've never been diagnosed, so I don't self-diagnose myself. You know what I mean? I don't say, well, I've got PTSD or I've got DID or anything like that. What I do is I just look at what these things are, and then, some of the symptoms I relate to, and some of them I really don't. You know what I mean? I don't relate to all of this stuff. Some of it makes sense to me, and it sort of seems like, yeah, I've had that. Like I've had flashbacks, and I have had flashbacks, and I still do actually. They're not as obtrusive and they're not as problematic as they used to be. I remember even in my 30s and even late 20s, where flashbacks would really bother me. I'd have nightmares. I was still having a lot of nightmares about the abuse that I suffered right up until about 4 or 5 years ago. So that's the whole thing. I don't have nightmares anymore about the abuse that I suffered from, especially at the hands of my mother. That's mainly the nightmares that I had were all to do with her. And she even told me she would haunt me till the day she died. And she said she would haunt me till the day I died. That's right, because she died. She says, I'll haunt you to the day that you die. And she really did. You know what I mean? Like, it was in my psyche that she was always going to be there haunting me with the abusive, that she put on me, right? And just her whole behavior toward me, which was very violent and very vicious, right? And even after the physical abuse stopped, she was still a vicious woman. Nothing really changed there. She was hurtful in every way, right? She couldn't physically abuse me anymore, but she could verbally cut me down, and emotionally cut me down, you know what I mean? And that's what she would do until the day she died. And then afterwards, I had to deal with all these flashbacks and memories of the abuse, Most of us do, and not everybody, right? Some people don't, I guess. And I haven't really talked to a whole lot of survivors about that. I know that I've talked to survivors that have had flashbacks and that still do. So I know there's people out there that do have them, and including myself. But mine are kind of, because I'm dealing with this stuff and allowing myself to work through it, I don't have nearly the flashbacks that I used to. And they don't seem to bother me that much, right? They don't take up my whole day. I'd have a flashback years ago, I'd have a flashback of my mom, especially the beatings that I took from her because they were so vicious and violent, right? That it stayed in my mind, and I could still hear her cursing me, and see what she was doing to me, and I was like reenacting it. I was there, you know what I mean? And these flashbacks would actually affect me for the rest of the day. They would affect my whole day because I would sit and think about just how damaging it really was, and it would cause me to be sad, it would cause me to be mad, I'd be angry, I'd be upset, and so then the rest of my day would just be a real drag, a real bummer, because I'd be thinking about all this stuff. And now, because I'm working through a lot of my stuff and I'm on a healing journey for the first time, since about 4 years ago, those flashbacks don't affect me like they used to, which is great, because now when I have a flashback, I just put it back in the back of my mind. Oh, that's a flashback. No big deal. Has no bearing on me now, because it's just a memory just coming in for whatever reason. So I don't sit there and because I'm allowing myself to work through this. So they don't bother me as much as they used to, but I know they used to be very obtrusive. And I have flashbacks at work, just sitting there working. All of a sudden it pops into my head and I remember what my mom, a few of the episodes that my mom, especially a couple of beatings that I took from her that were so traumatic that they just stayed in my mind. You know what I mean? It's like the feelings associated with them stayed in my mind, right? And I have a lot of body memories, so there's a problem there, because every time my back hurts, I know exactly where it's from. Say, my mom used to, physically abuse me, so she used to beat on me. So my back, I have issues with my back. I have a few places in my back that actually bother me on a daily basis, and I know why. So it's like, okay, it's kind of hard, because I know the pain that I'm feeling in my back is like, well, okay, I know exactly what that was from, my mom's fist, or some sort of object. It's like horrible, right? And so, and I was also involved in some car wrecks too. So some of my pain is associated with car wrecks that I was in, and that's enough to cause somebody PTSD too, because I was almost killed in a couple of car wrecks. So one of them was my fault, and the other one wasn't. But the thing is I have body memories from that too, but that doesn't stress me out as much as the abuse that I suffered. The car wrecks didn't stress me out nearly as much as the abuse that I suffered as a child. I guess if I had a normal, beautiful childhood where I don't know what's normal. All kids experience some sort of. No one's perfect. No parent's perfect. No child's perfect. But I'm just saying, suppose it was a healthy home and everybody was behaving themselves and there was no abuse. Everybody was showing the appropriate nurturing and love and care. I guess had I got that, and then I had those car wrecks really would have probably seemed a lot worse to me. But I used to I was involved in quite a few car wrecks actually, and I would just walk away from most of them because I didn't want to go to the hospital. I didn't want to go get checked out. And I was so used to being battered, right? One car wreck that I was in, my friend was driving, and we had this. She rammed this guy, not on purpose. It's his fault, right? She was just driving along, and this guy pulled out in front of her, and she was in a truck, and we were in her truck, and she rammed him, and thank God he lived, but it was a pretty bad wreck, and she was thrown out of the vehicle and ended up on the street with a rock in her head, and I had a big gash on the top of my head as well, and my hand and wrist were somewhat injured from going up against the windshield and cracked the dash and everything, and I just got out and went home. Because I was so used to being beaten on as a child, I was like, oh, well, no big deal. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I'll go and I'll heal from this. Because when you're abused as a child physically and in every way, you're used to that sort of stuff, right? So, I went home and people were like, you should go to the hospital, man. I was like, no, I'm not going to the hospital. Forget that. I'll just go home. And so every time, it's kind of hard on a person, like when you're abused as a child, this other stuff, you might tend to not take care of yourself as well as you should. Right, and that's a huge issue. But yeah, I guess those accidents would have probably been a lot more scary for me had I grown up in this awesome home and, never had any real traumatic events. But because trauma was part of my life, it had been since I was born, and real trauma. We're talking horror stories, we're talking horror in my home. Those car wrecks really didn't affect me that much, right? But they did physically. So I'm still suffering from a lot of that too. But the whole, the abuse was far more obtrusive to me, you know what I mean? So I really never had any flashbacks of those car accidents. It's all about my mom and the abuse that she put on me, a little bit from my dad, but mainly from my mom. And so, it's if you're suffering with this, make sure that you get some help. We have about 30 seconds here, but I'm going to continue talking. So if anybody wants to pick up the rest of the show, you can. Sorry about that. I only scheduled it for 15 minutes by accident. So tomorrow morning I'll be back on same time, same place. I promise. I'll set 2 alarm clocks, 6 o'clock a.m. So anybody who wants to tune in, that's great. I'll be back on tonight on my show as well at 9:30 p.m. here at Child Abuse Prevention, Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us, and also Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. I'll be on there tonight as well, and here on Blog Talk Radio. And so take care of yourselves, everybody. Make sure you get some help. Just reach out. Don't allow yourself to suffer in silence and suffer on your own. If you're having a hard time, if you need to, you call a crisis line. I'm serious. I know that that's what I would do. I no longer will allow myself to suffer through this on my own. And if I need help, I'm going to call a crisis line. You know what I mean? Like, that's my commitment to myself, because I deserved so much better, and so do you. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and have a great day, and we'll talk to y'all real soon. And to my friend Gypsy Witch in Australia, have a lovely night. I know you're off to Dreamland, and I wish you sweet dreams, and we'll talk to you real soon. So take care, everybody, and I'll see you on the flip side. And I'll continue talking here now. The show's probably not streaming live, but I'll continue on. I'm going to continue for another 15 minutes. And so, these issues of flashbacks and whatnot, they can be pretty harsh. I can remember the beatings that I took, really, because I have visual memories of the pictures, in my mind of my mom battering me and hurting me, you know what I mean? So I know I can picture the beating itself. It just comes in very clear because I was cognitive at the time. And it's harsh. It's very, very harsh because it just stays with you. So I used to kind of think of it like this thing that was just never going to leave me alone, not only was I abused as a child, but not only that, I had to suffer with the memories of it and the body memories of it my whole life. And I'm like, am I ever going to be free of this? And that's pretty much why, 4 years ago, a little bit over 4 years ago, I was sitting there thinking, that I just wanted out of my pain. I didn't want to kill myself, but I was thinking, how am I going to get out of this pain? So I was always planning my suicides, right? I never went through it, thank God. Never went through with it, but because I'm still here, thank God. So I'm just typing a quick message here in the chat room. So, it's harsh on people. And I thought, how am I ever going to, until I allowed myself really to get to heal, and move forward in my healing journey and actually start my healing journey, really, it was just always going to be like that, because I had to face it, and I had to realize that, hey, I'm going to have to do this myself. Oh my God. It's just harsh. It really is. So I know so many people that suffer with these things, and so it's really harsh. I'm just letting people know. People are asking if they can hear the show, but it's just not streaming live anymore, so they'll have to listen to the archive. So there's so many issues that surround this stuff. The effects of abuse are huge. Not for everybody. Not everybody would have, PTSD or have flashbacks or have body memories, but some people do. And I've talked to many people, many survivors who have body memories, and because of the abuse that they suffered as a child, and that's horrible, because I know exactly, where my back hurts. That's where my mom beat on me, and that's where the damage was done. There's parts of my back that are actually the nerves are dead, so I can't. I'm numb, right? I can't feel anything there, and around it is a whole lot of pain. So it's like a nerve center that, I don't know. It's like a cluster of nerves that, some of them were killed, and then around it is very painful. So, like I know that's from being thrown into walls and being beaten on, right? That's about half my back is like that, and so it's harsh. It really is, and there's much they can do for it. So it's just you just deal with it, right? And I know where that came from. So it's kind of sad. It is, because I look back and I think, how could you do that to your child? I think about the beatings that my mom dished out, especially my mom. My dad used to beat on me too. It didn't seem to affect me as much because I didn't care about my dad, right? Like my dad, I didn't care about him. I didn't even really have any love in my heart for him because I had witnessed him hurting my family and my mom for so long that, when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, I really didn't care about him. And so if he beat on me, I really didn't care. I was like, whatever. I'd just tell him to his face that I hated him, and, he didn't mean anything to me. And but my mom, I really wanted her. I was really always wanting her to love me and care about me, and because I cared about her, and I loved her, and I hated to see what was happening to her. I hated to see what she was doing to me, and it was harsh. I mean, it was very harsh. And so, just to think about what a parent can do to a child, and when it's your own parents, it's like, my God, you know what I mean? Did I deserve to be beaten on like that? No, no child does. You don't ever take a rolling pin to your child's head, never. In anger, after slamming them into the wall and kicking them around and then bashing them in the head with a rolling pin, until you crack their head open. I mean, is that something you don't do that to your child, right? And I don't care how the relationship is. There's no reason or excuse for that. You know what I mean? And another time when I was really young, I wrote about this in my book. If anybody's interested, get a copy of my book, A Life of Death and Redemption. Excuse me, I'm having some coffee or trying to wake up. But my book is it's pretty graphic. It's like my shows. I mean, I talk about the whole thing, and I wanted people to know, what happened, and I wanted people to know the truth. And because abuse hurts, and everybody's always sugarcoating the whole thing. It's like, well, we got to make it sound a little better because it's so disturbing. It's like, no, we need to tell it like it is, man. You know what I mean? Abuse is abuse, and it's ugly. It's as ugly as you can possibly imagine. And anybody who's survived it knows, And so it's horrible what people do to their children, and it's just in other people's children. It's just not right. And so I detailed that in my book, in A Life of Death and Redemption. All the proceeds are going to Dreamcatchers for Abused Children because that's what I wanted. I didn't want the money for that book. And the reason being is that money should go help stop child abuse, right? I mean, that's where my heart is. That's what I want. I don't want that money to pay my rent. You know what I mean? Like, I'll make it somehow. I'll make my rent. But, I wanted that book to go to really open up people's eyes to what abused children go through and what happens to a family that is destroyed because of domestic violence and abuse, and a whole set of 10 lives destroyed, right? And what happens to children when they're being abused, from my eyes, as a young child. So, if you want to get a copy of the book, all the proceeds are going to Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. But I did detail the beatings in there very clearly because I was cognitive and well aware of what was going on. The main beatings that I can remember, especially after the age of 7, I mean, I was completely aware of what was going on and did not push those memories back in my mind somewhere. I hung on. I knew what was happening to me. You know what I mean? And very harsh. You know what I mean? Like you don't bitch slap your child until you break their nose and till they're passing out. You know what I mean? And then the blood. Like, I couldn't even get my nose to stop bleeding. Did my mom help me? No, because she was the one that's trying to kill me. It's like I had to go and try to get my nose to stop bleeding myself. And my sister did try to help me out for a few minutes, and then she got really, because she doesn't like the sight of blood, so she freaked out and left the bathroom. So I was sitting there just trying to figure out how the hell I was going to get my nose to stop bleeding, because I thought I was going to die for sure. But I told my mom, I said, go ahead and kill me. Just go ahead and kill me. You've already killed me anyway. You know what I mean? So then she came in with a belt and was whipping my legs with it, whipping me, my arm and my legs. And that was my life with my mom. That was pretty much how that was an extreme example of the abuse. But the whole issue is that was pretty much my life with my mom. I mean, that was, I didn't paint every day because I couldn't go and talk about every single day. You know what I mean? From childhood. The thing is I pointed out some very severe stuff because I wanted people to see it. But that was my life with my mother. I mean, she was quite often slapping me around and pushing me into walls and choking me. My dad was often choking me as well. Like they just did not. They were so ignorant, you know what I mean? And they were abused themselves, and they hated each other, and they hated the family, and they hated these kids. And my mom especially hated these kids because she popped them out from a man who was abusing her. She hated my dad. She didn't hate my dad. I know my mom loved my dad, but the thing is she hated what he was doing. And my dad was mentally ill, and so what are you going to do? She kind of felt sorry for my dad because he was mentally ill, and yet part of her hated him because of the way he was treating her and the children. And, here they are brought up on abuse charges. Did that change them? No. They just continued to abuse us, right? And, I mean, this, that's why I wrote my book. Because I thought, man, people need to know that this stuff happens. And not every child is going to get some help. And so I'm speaking out on behalf of survivors who went through their childhood without any help. And we're expected to just pull it together and, get over it. So many times people have said, oh, can't you should just get over it. It's like, okay, you put yourself in my shoes for a few minutes, and see if you can get over it. you probably couldn't. You know what I mean? It took everything I had really to stay alive. It would have been so much easier for me to die, right? But I've had to fight to live my whole entire life. You know what I mean? Because my parents, the option of death was always there. Either they were going to kill me or I was going to kill myself. One or the other. And talk about a fight. You know what I mean? And it's a psychological fight. You bet it is. And some people think it's no big deal, but it's a huge deal. And so I like what Catherine Patricelli has to say here. We'll finish this up and then we'll continue on here tomorrow. But I want to take a look at the rest of this article. It says post-trauma victims' attempts at avoidance of trauma-related things can push them towards impulse actions that less frantic people would avoid. PTSD victims commonly abuse drugs, for instance. And I would say that some probably don't. Not every person who suffers with PTSD would do drugs. I did drugs because my brothers did drugs. It was an option for me. I mean, when I grew up in the house, there was drug use going on in the home. I didn't never take any of my brothers' drugs because they would have killed me. My brothers were slapping me around and abusing me anyway without, any reason. So I certainly wouldn't have given them any reasons to do that. So I never took my brothers' drugs, I'll tell you that. But they were doing drugs. I thought, well, I'll do drugs. That's a good way to cope, you know what I mean? But actually, I never sat and thought about that. I never said, oh, I'll do drugs because my brothers are doing drugs and that's the way to cope. Actually, what happened was I hated drugs and I didn't want to be a drug user until the age of 12. And at the age of 12, I thought, you know what? I'm joining them because I hated my parents at that point. That's the worst, really the worst point in my life where I felt the lowest was right around 12, 13 years old. And that's where most of the physical abuse was happening with my mom and my dad, was right in that period of years there. And, just a daily barrage of I hate you. My mom would scream at me, I hate you, I hate you. Get out of my house, get out of my face. She'd throw me out of the house, beat on me. And I knew I was not wanted. And I thought, you bastards, I'm going to do drugs. I don't care. I'll destroy myself before you can. So that was my mission, was to destroy myself before my parents could. Because I was thinking, hey, this is my body. If I want to destroy my body, I do. I wanted to take some control because my parents were destroying my body, right? And my brother who had sexually abused me, which I consider complete destruction of my sexuality, right? Because I had severe issues with that, And it's like I thought, this is my body, and look at what people are doing to my body. They're destroying my body. And so I thought, hey, I'll destroy it before they can. It was just a way to take control and also a way for me to escape mentally, you know what I mean? Because as long as I was high, and with my friends, I could have a good time. So I used to laugh and have fun with my friends, no problem. And we'd get stoned, we'd be high. So I started doing drugs at the age of 12. And PTSD, not PTSD. I was doing PSD, LSD, PSD, angel dust, right? And no kids should be doing angel dust. No 12-year-old anyway. And I love that stuff, man. It was awesome. And I love drugs. I used to hate drugs, but I turned into this huge drug addict. And I was high every chance I could be, and I would take whatever I could get. The only thing I didn't do was shoot up because I didn't like the idea of needles. And but I was doing cocaine. I was doing whatever I could get my hands on. Mainly I was a pothead. But I was experimenting with other stuff as well. And then as an older teen, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, I was pretty much a coke and speed addict, right? So they could have taken my life, and I'm so glad I got off the drugs. At the age of 21, I said, that's it, man. I don't want to, I'm going to end up like my brother, dead, right? Or I'm going to end up in the gutter. I'm going to end up in the street, dead, And I thought, oh, my God, I'm so glad that I changed my mind. And, but that's why I did the drugs, was because I wanted to be able to destroy my body and not allow my parents to do it for me, because both my parents were physically abusing me and abusing me in every way. And I thought, hey, I'll do it first, right? It was my way of getting back at them to say, well, I'll destroy myself first before you can. And so I was really not taking care of myself at all, and from 12 years on, right? So it's harsh what abuse does to children, and I know so many people probably can relate to what I'm talking about, and I know some people maybe can't, but there'd be some out there who can. And it's really sad when you think that you'll kill yourself and destroy yourself before your parents can. That's pathetic. And, that's what they did to me, you know what I mean? And I continued to plan my suicides all the way up until I was 41. So And then I made a deal. I made a commitment with myself. I said, man, no more. I'm winning this fight, Like, I want to win this fight. And so I don't want my parents to win, so how am I going to do this? Okay, I have to stay alive, right? And I deserve a good life, And I started to really talk to myself and think about this stuff and think it through a little differently. I changed my mind is what I did. I just changed my mind completely, and I said, you know what? I did not deserve any of that. That was not my fault. I didn't deserve any of that abuse, not at all. And I was a good kid. And I had to learn to love myself because I knew that my parents were never going to be able to do that. I knew that I was never going to get that love that I needed as a child from them, right? It was pretty obvious. My dad's 88, mentally ill, and my mom's dead, right? And so I thought, okay, I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to learn how to love myself and how to love that child who was so wounded, who still sits within me, my inner child, right? But I can picture her. I can picture the blood. I can picture the bruises. I can picture the beatings. I can picture the psychological damage done to that poor girl. I can picture myself at that age, see, because she lives within me, right? And I had to learn how to love her and tell her it would be okay and that I was here and that I was not going to ever allow anything else to hurt her again. You know what I mean? So I've had to do a lot of work on my inner child, and I just it's so worth it to stick around. It really is. And that's why I'm doing these shows, and it's why it's so incredibly important to me, to be able to do these shows, is to be able to say to people, you never give up. You may have some extremely bad days, ahead, which I know, life is not pretty most of the time, and a lot of times it sucks, but we can walk through it, we just have to get through each day. One step at a time. And don't do it alone. Make sure you get some help. I have some awesome help. Let me tell you, I actually have the opportunity to talk to counselors and therapists because they're my friends. And I have the opportunity to talk to people who are survivors and who help me out on a daily basis. So I'm no longer alone in this, right? And so, it's awesome to be able to be on this side of this. But I know what it's like on the other side. And that's why I'm doing these shows, right? So it's so important to me that you stick around, right? And you stick it out and you make the decision and make the commitment to win this fight and stay alive and be well. Get the help that you need so that you can love yourself and you can walk with your head held high and you can say, hey, look who I am. Look who I am. They couldn't kill me. That's what I love that. I just love it. I love to say that because I'm like, my parents couldn't kill me. Ha, ha, ha. And because I'm not going to kill myself, they really couldn't kill me because that's what they wanted. They pushed all their children to kill themselves, right? So, hey, I'm alive and I win this fight because I stay alive and I'm working every day to learn to love myself just that much more. You know what I mean? It's like every day, I'm like, I'm learning to love myself. I'm learning to do this stuff, you know what I mean? And it's so worth it. So that's what I say. Stick it out. Stick around, And if you have to, you call a crisis line, whatever you have to do. But you make sure that you stick it out and you stay here with us. So we'll talk to you real soon. I'll be back on tonight. You guys have a great day. If you need something, I will be around today. Facebook, contact me on Facebook. I love to have Facebook friends. I have a lot of friends, and I'm always looking for more friends. So connect with me on Facebook if you like, if you want, if you feel like it. And otherwise, you can leave me a message here on Blog Talk Radio. You know what I mean? Like I'll be around here today. So just take really good care of yourselves, everybody. I really do care. And, I'm a person who does care about people very much. So take good care. Have a good day. Bye-bye.